Welcome back to the Macro Golf YouTube channel. Today we're talking about the Blast Golf sensor, and we're talking specifically about using this sensor for measuring swing speed and hand speed. So I've done another video previously on other speed radars. I've tested the cheapest radar, and I'll stick a link to that video here. And I've also tested the speed radar that we use here in the studio. But the Blast Golf is really interesting because for just £100, it's actually cheaper than a lot of the radars, and it will give you club head speed both with and without a ball, which is amazing for if you're looking to work on swing speed training. Maybe you've got speed sticks, or maybe you want to work on your speed at the range. You can get numbers for both with and without a ball, which is an amazing value for just £99. But when something is good value, we always need to wonder, is it that value for a reason, and is it actually not that accurate? I've measured it a lot for things like tempo, and it seems to be pretty accurate. But I'm looking now at the air swing function, looking at the swing speeds function without hitting a ball, and I'm going to put this really to the test against what I believe to be the most accurate measure of swing speed without a golf ball. So here in the Macro Golf Studio, we use this radar here, which is the swing speed radar by Sports Centers, and we believe this is one of the most accurate measures of getting swing speed without a golf ball. So if you're going to practice speed training, or if you want to just measure your speed without a golf ball, maybe you're at home, we believe that this was the most accurate measure. So this is what we use in the studio, and I've done a full review on this, on how to use it and how good I believe it to be. But today we're going to put the Blast Golf up against this radar to test its accuracy, swing speed without a ball. So there's obviously some differences between the two units. The swing speed radar obviously takes a measure of the club as it passes through in front of it, and price range for this is around £130, £140, something like that online. The Blast Golf, however, works completely differently. So this actually sits on the end of the golf club, sits on the butt of the club, and it will work on the path that the club is moving. So it will work on how fast it's moving this way, but it will also calculate the length of the club, and then obviously do some algorithm and calculation based on rotation to then calculate club head speed. So we can always assume that something that's going to take an actual reading of club head is probably going to be more accurate than something that's making an assumption over the club head. But with such complex data and data points now, I wouldn't be surprised if this can get pretty close to an accurate reading. So I'm going to set both units up. I'm going to set the radar out in front of me where we would normally do it for our speed testing. I will stick this into the club. I'm going to use a driver for this because I think that for most of you, you'll be using a driver if you're going to do some kind of speed training, or using a speed stick. So I think the length of club really makes a difference. I think the longer the club, obviously there's going to be more variance of speed. So I'm going to use a driver. I'm going to put the driver to the test, and I'm going to have this on the end of the golf club, have this in front of the club. We're going to make 10 swings, gradually increasing in speed as we go, and then see what measurements we get for all of them. So we can see the setup here. We've got the Blast Golf set up down the driver, and we're trying to get this to be as accurate down the club face as possible. And then just in front of us, we've then got our speed radar. So we're going to try and sync these two up, and we're going to take a measure of the averages. Okay, so I've got the Blast set up in the air swing mode with the driver set in. I'm going to place that down next to the radar. I'm just going to make 5 swings, progressively getting quicker. Take that as the benchmark, and then from there I'm going to make 10 quick swings, and then I'll basically just take measures from both units. I'll put both up on the screen here as I swing, and we will see where we get to. Okay, 5 warm-up swings done. I'm now going to go for the 10 swings. I'm going to try and make them as close to a normal golf swing as possible. Just try and keep the settings as close as possible. So I'm going to try and make a normal golf swing. I'm going to try and set up every single time. So it's not going to look like a speed training session. It's going to look more like trying to make 10 different golf swings. And then we'll take the numbers small and stick up there. Okay, so I'm going to do adding up the numbers, work out averages, and we'll see what the results are. Okay, so we finished testing, and I've gone and worked out all the numbers, and I'll share the results with you now. So interestingly, what I looked at is the average, which I think is also important. So I made 10 swings, so I took the average of those 10 swings, but also looked at the minimum reading across the 10 swings across both radars, and also the maximum across both radars. So for the radar that we used in the studio, we had a maximum reading of 121 mile an hour, a minimum reading of 111 mile an hour, and an average of 115.5. So when we looked at against the Blast had a maximum of 126, so a little bit higher, a minimum of 116, again a little bit higher, and therefore an average of 119, again a little bit higher. So it seemed like the Blast numbers across the board were all just slightly elevated across the radar. But what's really interesting also is when we see the chart of each swing and measuring each swing, is not as if the blast radar just stays that little bit higher than the swing radar for the whole test. We actually see quite a lot of variation in numbers. We see some quite kind of big variances in terms of highs from this and lows from the blast and vice versa. So I don't think it's quite as simple for us to say that the blast is accurate, but accurate to itself. I don't think we can even make that assumption. But what I do think we need to consider, and definitely what I need to consider when I go and do another test on this in the future, is that the swing radar that we use will obviously take the measurement of the club as it works past the radar. So for me, if I was to generate more speed at that point in my swing, so say for example, if I was to release either earlier or later, that is going to change the result that the swing speed radar will get. But I believe the blast will just take the maximum number. So if I've released early or released late, it won't know that, it will just take the highest number of that swing. So it might be that on the swings where we've seen a big variance, so for example, there's a few where I've got a higher number on the blast and a lower on the radar, it might be that maybe I've released a little bit too late or a little bit too early, and therefore I wasn't at peak speed in front of the radar, but the blast then picked up my peak speed. And if that is the case, then that's absolutely fine, because if we're doing some speed training and we're trying to work on speed and trying to get an instant feedback for our speed, then actually that seems like the blast is going to give us that. But when we think of the main purpose of speed training is to have more speed at impact or just after impact, then the speed radar might be a little bit more applicable for us to position that into where the optimal position for getting speed would be, and therefore our speed training would be a little bit more accurate to what we're going to expect on the golf course. But I think what's cool is the blast doesn't just give us the swing speed data. So I'll put it up on the screen here and show you everything that we get. So you can obviously see the 10 swings that were made, and what you can then do is you can then work on whatever metric you want to look at. So for example, if you wanted to work on peak hand speed, for example, then it's going to give you all the metrics of hand speed all the way through. And what was actually quite interesting is my hand speed on all of the swings stayed around within 1 mile an hour of each other. So it went from around 24.5, dropped down to 24, and then got up to around 25.3. So not a big variance in the hand speed, but a much bigger variance in the overall swing speed or the predicted club head speed. I mean, the blast obviously gives you a lot of extra data as well in terms of backswing time, downswing time, tempo, and all this great stuff. But if we're just looking at the accuracy of the swing speed measurement, then I think it's safe to say that it is going to give you a pretty accurate measure of the swing speed that's happening at that time. But what it's not going to necessarily do is be able to pin that down to exactly where impact would be and give you a measure of exact impact time. But what I do know is if you then put a ball and you actually did this testing with a ball, that number will be accurate. So it will give you the number at impact, and it knows when impact occurs because of the vibration through the club. So overall, I think this would be a great tool if you're looking to work on your speed training. I think for the price of just under £100, I think it's a really affordable way of actually starting to measure your swing speed both with and without the ball. I think it's a perfectly usable tool in comparison, for example, to a PRGR radar. If you're just going to work on speed sticks or with your driver working on speed, I think it's going to give you a number that's going to be accurate enough for you really to work on speed and get instant feedback from that training that you're doing. So I hope you found that video useful. I'm going to do another video in the future. If I've already done it, I'll stick it here. If I've not done it yet, then it won't be there yet. But now I'm going to start to do a little bit more detail on how I would use the blast radar for speed training. I think I'm going to play around with setup a little bit and see what we can do to actually get the most out of this blast golf trainer for our overspeed training. But until then, thank you for joining this video. If you enjoyed this video, it means a lot for me if you hit the subscribe button, click the like button, send this video to a friend who needs to work on their speed or is interested in buying a Blast Golf trainer. But until then, I'll see you on the next video.